Welcome, everybody. My name is Jesse Richardson, and I'm an associate professor of law here at the WVU College of Law. And welcome to the Strategic Cannabis Conference, Industrial and Medical Uses. This is something that we believe that is very appropriate to have at the College of Law and to have at the university. And you'll find out more about all of this as we go along today. As you can see from the schedule, we've divided it into 3 different blocks, basically. We're going to start off with a legal overview of cannabis. Then we're going to talk about medical cannabis and then industrial cannabis. And we're going to ask you to please hold your questions till the end of each block. At the end of each block, we will have time for questions from the audience. So that's how we're going to try to do it. There's a lot to go over, but we're going to compress it into small amounts of time, but we will have time for questions. We welcome you to the West Virginia University College of Law, and I'm looking forward to the rest of the conference. I will recognize Morgan Leach, who is a third-year law student here at the College of Law. And Morgan is really the driving force behind this conference and behind trying to get some things done in West Virginia. We're going to have Crystal Good kick us off this afternoon, and I think she maybe has some poetry even for us.
It's all poetry. Thank you, Professor Richardson. Good afternoon, everybody. Greetings on this March 17th, 2016, St. Patrick's Day. May you have the hindsight to know where you've been, the foresight to know where you're going, and the insight to know when you've gone too far. My name is Crystal Good, and I'm a poet, an entrepreneur, and an advocate for all good things West Virginia. Some call me senator, as in social media senator. It's a political office that I created, and I won. And no, I wasn't smoking anything when I came up with this idea, but it's a role I play to make it easier for West Virginians to get involved in politics by commenting on legislative issues and encouraging voter engagement via social media. Because when the going gets tough, the tough in West Virginia get creative. And now is the time to be creative and tough when it comes to ending the prohibition on prosperity. And we need to be moving towards new industry, and that includes the cannabis industry. But around here, I'm also known for leading the conversation on West Virginia and quantum physics. Yep, West Virginia and quantum physics. I was honored to give a TED Talk on this subject, and it's really about encouraging West Virginians to get out of their Schrodinger's cat box. But today, we've gathered not to talk about quirks or spooky action at a distance, but something equally full of necessity and unknowns: cannabis. Or, as it's been called throughout the years, reefer, marijuana, pot, Mary Jane, dope, weed, and perhaps the most damning of all, the devil's plant, or how about this, the devil's lettuce, if you prefer. Can you believe that? The devil's lettuce? Can you believe that someone could compare a little green plant with 5 pointed leaves covered in crystals that grows right from our God-given ground with the devil himself? It's a bit harsh, I think. Well, of course, I don't agree with the term the devil's plant, and I know that most of you gathered in this room today do not believe that either, or believe that the cannabis industry is evil. But I think it's important to mention because it illustrates exactly what makes this issue so tough, so sensitive, and ultimately so hard to advocate for. But the evolution of West Virginia depends on truthful and deliberate cannabis industry education. And that's what makes our presence here today very important, perhaps a wee bit blessed. So, what do we know about this little green plant covered in crystals with 5 pointed leaves? Well, throughout the years, society has demonized the plant It has been prohibited by our government. Users of the plant have been arrested, prosecuted, and locked behind bars, some for entire lifetimes. But what else do we know about this little green plant covered in crystals with 5-pointed leaves? Well, perhaps what we don't discuss enough is industrial hemp that was once a crop that our government mandated farmers to grow. Hemp possesses an enormous potential for our agriculture industry, enormous. It is resilient, fast-growing little plant that can be used to make rope, cloth, concrete, even BMW car parts. Whatever you can imagine, hemp has the potential to help create, all while capturing carbon, making our air healthier, and helping one of America's most precious resources, farmers. We also don't celebrate enough the ways that medical cannabis has helped our friends, our relatives, our neighbors as they've battled cancer or other illnesses. People are stepping out and finding the courage to share their experiences with the plant without fear of being judged because it works. And so many have discovered that cannabis has helped to control uncomfortable side effects of chemo, and that cannabis has given them a way to manage their pain without resorting to prescription drugs that have managed to entangle so much of our state's population. And most recently, one of our very own, Delegate Bill Flanagan, from right here in Monongalia County, gave a compelling testimony on this point, urging our lawmakers not to increase mandatory prison sentences for marijuana from 5 to 15 years. We heard you, Bill, and we appreciate the stories that you shared. The bill was tabled unanimously. So, yes, absolutely. Thank you, West Virginia Legislature. Thank you, Delegate Flanagan. So fortunately for us, perceptions of this little green plant covered in crystals with 5-pointed leaves is changing. In 2016, we call it cannabis, and it is legal in 23 states and the District of Columbia. And while this is the same plant with the same properties that were once associated with the devil, we now understand once more that this little green plant isn't evil, but rather has an overwhelming potential to help and to heal our suffering people. So I propose a new nickname. I think we should call it the prosperity plant. And what we're here to talk about today is the prosperity plant and how it has the potential to create a big prosperity for our little state. I see the potential for prosperity in health, economic development, agriculture, new tax revenue, new industry, jobs, and sustainable manufacturing. Potential for prosperity for our endearing, beautiful, yet troubled and determined West Virginia. This plant can help us. This plant can feed us. It can help us feed ourselves. This is the plant that we can grow and help grow our state. Today, we're here to remove the stigma and realize the potential of this God-given prosperity plant. Today, we'll hear from Professor Jesse Richardson, who will talk about the legal status of both hemp and marijuana. We'll hear from Morgan Leach, who will tell us about how we can develop industries for both hemp and marijuana. We'll hear also from Dr. Milton Clark about the medical history and uses of marijuana. So again, welcome to the Strategic Cannabis Conference. You guys ready to get started? Great.
Thank you, Crystal. So I'm going to present an overview of cannabis laws in the United States. Why am I here? I am probably one of the few people in this room who has never tried cannabis. I do not even have to use President Clinton's defense that I didn't inhale, because I didn't even go that far. But I am the immediate past president of the American Agricultural Law Association. And so I got a phone call about a year ago that was one of those phone calls that you ask yourself, is this a reality TV show or something? What's going on here? I got a phone call from a a company in Israel that has produced cannabis seeds with a THC level of below 0.3%, and the level of whatever chemical it is in marijuana that reportedly provides medical benefits that are really, really high. And they said, we have looked all over the United States and we want to locate in West Virginia. We want to bring our seeds to West Virginia and start producing industrial hemp in West Virginia. We've looked at Colorado and California, and that doesn't really work for us. I checked them out, and it was for real. And so we're still talking. Hopefully we can get something done in that context. But what I want to do really quickly today is just give a really quick overview of what the laws are in the United States and why they are so confusing. I was speaking to the reporter from the newspaper just a few minutes ago, and she was like, well, then why is it illegal? Well, that's what we're going to talk about now. I'm going to talk about some legal classifications, a little history, the Controlled Substances Act. I apologize for the typo there, and what the DEA has been doing, and some recent federal developments, some state developments, and what that all means for us today. So I'm a lawyer, so we always want to define things. And I'm going to do something that a lawyer should never do in a presentation, is I'm going to use some terms interchangeably, not to confuse people, but because it's kind of been used interchangeably a lot out there. The first term is industrial hemp, and I think today the basic definition of that is the cannabis sativa L with less than a 0.3% THC by dry weight, and we can do that now. And I was talking to Morgan. I think that probably includes therapeutic uses like oils and the like that you can derive from that. There's also medical marijuana, which various states are legalizing. Just yesterday, Pennsylvania passed a bill on medical marijuana, and earlier this week, industrial hemp. And third, recreational use. We have explicitly excluded recreational use from our conference today. That is not something we are interested in addressing at this point. As some of you are intimately familiar, there have been extensive field studies on medical or on recreational use of marijuana. We're going to look at the other two uses at this point. So the first law in the United States that addressed marijuana was the 1937 Marijuana Tax Act. And it defined hemp as a narcotic drug, and it required a federal permit to grow it, and it required a tax stamp. And from the data that we have, in 1943, the U.S. production of hemp reached its peak, as far as we know, with 150 million pounds, about 140 of those being for fiber and 10.7 million for hemp seed. By 1948, that amount had dropped to 3 million pounds, and we have no record of any recorded production after the late 1950s. So we have to start with the Controlled Substances Act of 1970. It prohibits the production of hemp without a federal permit. And to our knowledge, the DEA has never issued a federal permit. And it defines marijuana as all parts of the plant Cannabis sativa L. No distinguishment between the level of THC. It just says if it's marijuana, it's marijuana. And for those of you who aren't aware, they're the same plant, basically. There are different production methods and the like. In 2007, some North Dakota farmers challenged the DEA's authority to prohibit hemp production that was legal under state law. That case was dismissed. The next thing that really happened was that in 2003, the DEA issued 2 final rules on the legal status of hemp products. These rules, or proposed rules, said that hemp often contains high levels of THC, so the use of hemp is only allowed in highly controlled circumstances. And it prohibited cannabis products containing THC intended for human consumption. Those rules were challenged, and in February of 2004, the Ninth Circuit Court of Appeals permanently enjoined enforcement of the rule. So that's kind of why we're in this area of uncertainty and limbo. And if you look on the internet, and everything you read on the internet is correct, right? You'll see on the internet people saying, they'll point to this case and say, you can grow cannabis. You can sell cannabis, you can do whatever you want. It's really not that clear. In August of 2013, the DEA, or the Department of Justice, issued what is commonly called the Cole Memo and updated its marijuana enforcement policy. And this was in response to Colorado and Washington State legalizing marijuana. In that memo, the Department of Justice reiterated their position that marijuana is an illegal drug, and they stated that they will aggressively enforce this statute. But then they said, these 8 areas are going to be our priority. So it's kind of like they said, we're going to enforce it, wink, wink, but we're going to focus on these things. And the things that they said they're going to focus on are use of marijuana by minors, driving under the influence of marijuana, and cultivating marijuana on public lands. And there are 5 others, but I didn't want to list everything in that. Then comes the 2014 Farm Bill, which has kind of put a jolt in everybody in this area. And that's why the agricultural lawyers have been talking about this for a while. So in the 2014 Farm Bill, Section 7606 allows certain research institutions and state departments of agriculture to grow industrial hemp, for purposes of research conducted under an agricultural pilot program or other agricultural or academic research if allowed under state laws. And this is the bill that defined industrial hemp as containing less than 0.3% THC on a dry weight basis, or I should say not more than 0.3%. And this, it becomes more and more interesting. Senator McConnell is one of the driving forces behind this. Why is that? He wants economic development in Kentucky. With all due respect to Senator McConnell, I want to kick Kentucky's butt in economic development, and if we meet him in the NCAA tournament. Yeah. So one reason I'm here today is that I see a lot of potential for economic development in West Virginia. And when the federal law changes so that this is opened up, we need to be ready in West Virginia. Senator McConnell and others actually introduced an amendment to that bill which would have legalized industrial hemp throughout the United States. That amendment was not passed. There is a bill before Congress right now that would do the same thing. Then in the FY 2015 appropriations bill, Congress said, and this, it gets interesting, I tell you. no funds shall be made available to the Department of Justice to contravene the 2014 Farm Bill. So that's a pretty clear message that the DOJ better not mess with people who are operating under the Farm Bill. The Department of Justice and the DEA, though, they're still not on board with all of this, I don't think. So there is a pending bill in Congress that would exclude industrial hemp from the definition of marijuana under the Controlled Substances Act. Again, it uses the same definition. From what I can see, it's not really moving forward right now, but it does have bipartisan support. I think Congress is pretty busy right at the moment, either doing something or doing nothing, I'm not sure. So where is West Virginia on all of this? West Virginia was forward-thinking in a lot of ways because they passed their industrial hemp law in 2002, 12 years before the Farm Bill came out. And in that bill, they defined it as anything containing no greater than 1% of THC. However, they also had a clause that said, or whatever federal law says, whichever is more strict. And they established some licensing procedures. And the regulations were effective on June 1 of 2015, and that's where the regulations have that more restrictive definition if the federal government says so. It established research and marketing cultivation program licenses. I guess last week, the State General Assembly struck the term sell from the regulation. Distribute and deliver are still there. It limits the license to research, striking out marketing and cultivation, and it limits licenses to the Department of Agriculture and state institutions of higher learning. But so far, from what we've gleaned from the Department of Agriculture, we're still going to be able to work with private individuals as long as they are working with the Department of Agriculture or institutions of higher learning. So to kind of talk really quickly about what some states are doing, and a lot of this I learned from people in this room. Kentucky appears to be the leader in this. Morgan can tell you how many pounds they produced last year. You probably can too. How much was it?
Poundage, I'm not sure. This year it's 4,600 acres.
That's right, 4,600 acres of industrial hemp in Kentucky. So they are leading the way. Maryland recently passed a medical marijuana statute. Indiana is really pushing industrial hemp. Pennsylvania just Tuesday, I believe, passed the industrial hemp statute. There are now over 20 states in the United States that have legalized industrial hemp, including West Virginia. Pennsylvania just yesterday passed their medical marijuana statute. So you can look in the newspaper every day and see new things going on. We can't keep up with what's going on in the states. What might this mean for West Virginia, and why am I excited about this? I'm excited because I'm working with people in McDowell County, in other counties across the state. They're trying to figure out what are we going to do to redevelop the coal fields. And in McDowell County, they're talking about ATV tourism, and they're talking about farming. And if we can come up with a legal crop in agriculture that farmers could actually make a little money, that would be huge in West Virginia. West Virginia is close to a lot of people in the United States, and we've got rail transportation, air transportation to get stuff to people. I understand that West Virginia is ideal to grow hemp. In fact, there's been some illegal marijuana that they've tried to eradicate, and they have a hard time getting rid of it. It just keeps coming back up. So we have ideal conditions to grow the crop here. We've got locations to markets. We've got places that need redevelopment and need economic development. It looks like the perfect storm for West Virginia. What I always tell people is, when you talk about economic development, sure, you have to talk about why a certain industry is right for you, but the more important thing is, why are you ideal for that industry to come? And I think West Virginia has it all with respect to industrial hemp. That's why I got a phone call. I still don't believe. So putting my professor hat back on and my president of the American Agricultural Law Association hat, why do I care about all of this stuff? These are just some of the issues that we've already talked about. 3 or 4 years ago at the American Agricultural Law Association conference, we had a session on financing the marijuana industry. Because I don't know how many of you all know it, but most of the producers in Colorado, they have to put the cash under their mattress because no bank will take their money. Genetically modified organisms, they have a bad name, but now we can produce hemp that has very, very low levels of THC, very high levels of beneficial substances, and we can make it so that you can grow it in places like West Virginia very well. Traceability issues you're going to hear about next. We've already talked about traceability. We have the ability, if you eat a hamburger and you get sick, we have the ability to trace that back to the farmer who produced the cow, that produced the hamburger that made you sick. And we're going to hear about similar technology with respect to cannabis. Liability insurance. Some of you are probably pretty excited about the raw milk bill passing last week or week before. It took me about 10 minutes to find out that there is no insurance company in West Virginia that will insure that production. So I'm advising farmers, don't do it. Pollen drift. We've already dealt with pollen drift with respect to GMOs. If this happens, we're going to deal with it here. Water rights. They're already fighting over in the West whether marijuana growers have the water rights to grow. Conservation easements. Can you grow marijuana or industrial hemp if you have a conservation easement on your property? They've already thought about that. Right to farm. Is hemp production covered by right to farm? There's already been litigation on that. Drones. Drones are everywhere, and more. So we're going to have jobs and work to do for lawyers and others in West Virginia, which should make everybody happy. Thank you very much.
I think we're going to hold all questions until after each block. So next.
Is Cody Stiffler with the BioTrackTHC, who's going to tell us about some existing technology for traceability.
How's everybody doing today? All right. Come on, how's everybody doing today? It's a good conference to have, right? My name is Cody Stiffler. I am the VP for Government Affairs for BioTrackTHC. We're a seed-to-sale tracking and government monitoring system software provider for several state governments, recently a city government in California, and various vendors and licensees throughout the United States and abroad. Currently, we're in 23 states, including DC. We're in Canada, South America. We're piloting our program in 2 universities in Jamaica right now. And we just recently put our software in a potential cultivator in Australia. So basically, prior to working with BioTrackTHC, I was responsible for managing several medical centers throughout the state of Florida. And during my time there, I implemented specific protocols and policies that were able to hold the physicians as well as patients accountable for their actions with regard to prescription medication. From there, I went to BioTrackTHC and have been educating legislators as well as various industry leaders on the importance of seed-to-sale tracking and traceability with cannabis. A little bit about BioTrackTHC. As I said before, I have experience in tracking medication and specific protocols within doctors' offices, but we started tracking prescription medication. BioTrackTHC, a sub of Biotech Medical Software, originally created a biometric e-prescribing system that required your biometric as a physician to prescribe electronic prescriptions for patients for C2 medications in Florida. The patient would then go to the pharmacy, scan their thumbprint, holding both parties accountable 100% for their actions. We piloted that software at the University of Florida with great success. And during our time, we were actually out in Colorado lobbying that specific software. And we were approached by several people from the cannabis industry who said, you know, if you guys had something like this for the cannabis industry, you guys had a great market. So at that point, we pivoted to the cannabis industry. We worked with HIDA and the DEA to actually consulted with HIDA and the DEA to develop the e-prescribing program. We hold 2 US patents as well as 1 in Canada for electronic e-prescribing with biometrics for C2 prescriptions. Our software system has been SAS 70 certified, or what's now called SSAE 16 certified. And what that means is any company that has a software or a program that has specific controls in it to protect patient or banking data or specific data that's susceptible to illegal activities or bringing that software or bringing that information out of the software, an audit will actually cover these controls and make sure that they're appropriate for the industry. What we noticed in the private sector with a lot of cannabis businesses is that they were using multiple programs or multiple platforms to perform their everyday functions. So they would have something for cultivation management that was probably based off of inventory management for, say, vegetable growth, tomatoes or cabbage or what have you. They'd have something for their point of sale, a different software, a different program that they used. And then for their financial reporting capabilities, they were using something like QuickBooks. So what we decided to do was create a system that encompassed all of that under one roof. And we've been providing that software for several years now, about over 6 years, to various vendors and licensees in the cannabis space. What our software does is it provides a digital representation of reality for the vendors to the oversight agencies. So for example, in Washington State, we have the Washington State Traceability System, which is a separate software, not a vendor-based software, but a government-issued software that allows the licensees to submit their data based off of their inventory, their financial reporting, their employees' activities, and various other aspects of their business for the agency to feel comfortable in having regulatory oversight over what their actions are. This is a screenshot from our vendor-based software for licensees. And you can see based off of the picture that we had before, the cultivation facility, this is one of our cultivation licensees that uses our software. You can basically group your plants into rooms. If you want to do a harvesting or curing room, if you have a quarantine room for transportation. In Washington, the state law requires you to actually quarantine your product for a specific amount of time before you can transport it. So that allows the governing agency to come in and preview that transport and make sure that the product is correct. The way our system works is every individual plant is assigned a 16-digit global unique identifier, or what's commonly referred to as a barcode. One thing I do want to point out is that our system is agnostic completely to the type of tags that you would use in your business. So if you want to use Bluetooth tags, RFID, if you want to use QR codes, our system will generate those unique identifiers, and you can put them on any tag you pretty much choose. But what happens is at the point in time that the plant is planted, or the seed is planted, it receives that barcode. From that barcode, let's say you go into a flowering phase or a harvest phase, and you pull out dry material from the plants. That dry material is then associated a child identifier, which is linked back to the original identifier given to the mother plant or the actual source. And through the phase, all the way through extraction, destruction, waste, every time a new action is taken on that product, it's assigned another global unique identifier. And this allows for chain of custody and you to be able to follow the plant from product, or all the way from the plant, all the way to the product to consumer. Also, the software covers the financial aspect of it as well. So every time a patient receives a prescription and purchases cannabis at a medical dispensary, that transaction is actually tracked in the system. Not the patient's data, but the actual transaction itself. So the financial aspect of it is also tracked. And this will help later on down the line with banking. This is a medical flow chart that we have given out to several of our cultivators to let them know how the process works for the state traceability system. And as you can see, it goes all the way through from cultivation to the harvesting to the initial inventory, whether it be clones, it be the plant materials such as sugar leaves, keef, stems, any of the material is tracked. Even the waste is tracked. And as I said before, we use different unique identifying tags. So the unique identifier itself is always drawn from the system itself, but you can use any tag that you wish, whether it be barcodes, Bluetooth tags, RFID tags, or even QR codes. Our system has a built-in digital transport manifest. And the importance of the transport manifest is because when you have a cultivator, let's say you don't have a full vertical, where it's a cultivator, manufacturer, dispensary all under one roof, we have to actually transport that material from one place to another. And this is good for law enforcement. Law enforcement concern, if I pull over a vehicle that's got 6 pounds of flour in it, how am I supposed to know whether this is legitimate product or not? So what the transport manifest does is it lists all the individual information that I put up here. It also gives turn-by-turn directions that's pinged from Google Maps. Now the beauty of the Google Maps pinging is this space up top here in the system that shows the directions, the travel route, is actually free form. And if you read just above that, by the law in the state of Washington, if you're going to transport cannabis and your travel route takes you outside of the state's lines, because you have to stay within the state, you can actually free form to route your directions differently. So you can stay within the state and stay compliant. If a police officer pulls over a vehicle and sees that there's the right vehicle and that the material is correct, but there's a wrong driver, they can say, okay, well, maybe this car is stolen. Maybe this vehicle was stolen at the gas station. The guy went to go pump gas and went to the bathroom and the car was stolen. So the police officer knows he has to investigate further. Let's say, for instance, the person driving the vehicle has created a manifest with Photoshop and they're really good at it. Police officer can take the actual digital or the physical manifest in hand and contact the department that oversees cannabis and say, hey, I have this manifest. The number is here at the top on the right with a separate barcode for the manifest itself. He can basically call in, say that number on the manifest, and then he can verify the information from the digital copy that was originally created in the system with the oversight agency. Our reputation. BioTrackTHC, we are the leader in the industry right now for government contracting. We have over 1,500 vendors that are using our software for the private sector. We have we actually have 5 state contracts. We started with Washington, we have New Mexico, Illinois, we're deploying New York currently, and we just recently got Hawaii at the end of last year. And so far, we're the apparent award for a city in California right now, which would be the first traceability contract for cannabis in that state. We've tracked over $3 billion in transactions through our state system, just with Washington. We have, like I said, 1,500 locations using our software. We've tracked over 4 million grams of cannabis, and we've trained over 25,000 users on the actual using of both of our private sector software as well as our government software. So seed to sale tracking is a business solution that allows different businesses to track their actual actions within the business itself. So for a grower, manufacturer, or a dispenser, they have our software as a private sector software to cover their business solution. What we started seeing is when states were legalizing, they were hesitant to legalize because they didn't know how they were going to regulate it. They wanted to know, why should we legalize? We can't stop it from hitting the black market. There's going to be people growing pot all over the place, and we won't be able to, regulate it. So we started the traceability system. And our state monitoring system basically takes all the aggregate data that's developed in those private sector systems into one place for the government themselves to be able to have controls over what happens as far as destruction, transportation, laboratory testing, delivery, and all the way up to the point of sale. This is our Washington State Traceability Portal. In Washington State, they didn't mandate people to use an electronic reporting system for their business. So we had to sit here and say, okay, well, if somebody's licensed but doesn't want to use an electronic reporting system on site, we had to make it available for them to be able to report to the state. So as you can see up here, we have a licensee login. This is a free portal that's used by licensees that don't want to use a software for seed to sale on their business. So they can still keep inventory management by logging into this area here and reporting their inventory through the state. And it works virtually identical to what our core software does. We have a login for WLSCB, or WSLCB, which is up there for the state employees. And then for our quality assurance testing labs, there's a separate login to enter their results. This is all done in real time. So again, digital representation of reality, or digital representation of what's actually going on in the industry. We also have live mode and training mode for both our core software or private sector software and the state software. And what this allows for is for the state to be able to have people train to use the software and actually manipulate data and try and work with data inside the system to learn how it works. And then we have our live mode that's used as soon as somebody is trained and ready to go. So they don't have to worry about manipulating data or changing anything and staying compliant with the state. This also allows for continuing education or training for your employees. Let's say you have somebody who quits and you need to bring somebody on new, but we've already trained you and you've already gotten your software installed into your location. You can actually have them go in training mode and go through the software and basically simulate the same thing that you would be doing in live mode. We have compliance testing. The state of Washington actually wanted to have people go through a compliance test to prove their comprehension of the way the system works. So what we did is we created a script which gave a scenario for each licensee, and each licensee would go through that script, and in the training mode, they would actually take certain steps to go through the phases or life cycle of the plant all the way till it reached a patient. Once they completed it, and they had 100%, then the state said, okay, you finished your compliance test, you're shown comprehension of how to use the system, you will now have live access to the state traceability system. Inside, we have an integrated laboratory testing module. And the beauty of this is that no product can actually be released or transported to dispensary shelves without passing laboratory testing. So for mold, microbiological materials, E. coli, other bacterias, pesticides, foreign matter inspections done, all of these tests are done, and once your product actually passes QA, it is then available on a drop-down menu to put on a transport manifest and be shipped to a dispensary or a manufacturer. If it hasn't passed laboratory testing or it's failed, you can't add it to a transport manifest. It actually has to be destroyed. There's also another section in the state traceability system that allows the government to come back and say, okay, if this lot failed, for mold, you can still unlock it to be transported for extraction. I don't know if some of you know, but mold can actually be pulled out of the cannabis product. It's one of those contaminants that will actually be removed during the extraction process. So for specific testing that's failed, let's say for instance for mold, that product can still be used as an extraction for oil, but only if the state allows you. So they can unlock that, but you have to request it directly from the state. Here's a screenshot of the QA testing results in the state traceability system. So it'll show if this sample failed E. coli testing, that sample will no longer be available to be transported or used. It has to be destroyed. This is a screenshot of the actual generation of a transport manifest. And if you see there at the top, it will only show you items that have passed QA testing. So if, for instance, you go in and try and select something that's not on that list, you can't. I mean, there's nothing there. But only the product that has actually passed laboratory testing is available for you to put into a transport manifest. Our core system, as well as traceability, allows you to use integrated hardware. So this prevents for user error. Let's say, for instance, you're typing 16-digit barcodes all day. Instead of typing the barcodes, you just use a barcode scanner. You can actually integrate your peripheral equipment hardlined to the system. And this works for patient cards, this works for cash registers, touchscreen POS systems, label printers, and even biometric scanning. So when you go up to a POS station and you're going to sell product to a consumer, the employee actually has to scan their thumbprint. And this creates 100% accountability for the employees as well as the business. Another thing that I want to point out is that our state traceability and our core software, every interaction or every action that's taken in the system is logged on the back end. So say, for instance, you have an employee that's disgruntled and still has access to your system, and they go in there and they manipulate some of the data and try to put you out of compliance, we can go back and we can remove those actions and put you back into compliance state. We actually have, so far that I know, and I know that Oregon is working on their API, but so far that I know, we are the only ones to have a successfully deployed API. An API is an application program interface. And what that does is the state traceability system will pull all that aggregate data. Let's say, for instance, we have like the state of Washington where they can use any electronic reporting software they want. So they don't have to necessarily use us as a vendor or as a vendor software. Any of the competitor softwares out there, such as, I don't know, what have you, Viridian Sciences or, Greenbits or any of those other POS softwares that are used, they can still communicate with our state traceability system. Our API pulls the specific variables from their software and puts it into the state traceability system. So it doesn't matter what you use as a vendor or a licensee, it still will communicate with the state and will still allow them to have that oversight. We've had our API audited as well from Kirkpatrick Price. And what that did was it basically showed 100% efficiency for all of the functions within the API, making sure that the data that was being pulled from the vendors on the private sector was accurate and that the functions were 100% valid. Again, as I said, we have Washington State as our first contract. We've gone to New Mexico, Illinois, New York, and Hawaii. And we recently, like I said, got a contract for, well, hopefully we have it. We haven't signed a contract yet, but we were the awardee for the RFP for the first city contract in the state of California. As far as excise tax and reporting, this is a screenshot from one of the reports pulled from the state traceability system in Washington. And in it, I don't know if you guys can see down at the bottom, but this is a month-by-month basis for sales. And every month you can see the total sales and the excess tax that goes to the government. Now, the government can use this tax money or this tax revenue for whatever they see fit. Now, remember, Washington's a recreational state as well. So on the medical side, it's not that high, but with recreational as well, the tax revenue is way up there. We have letters of affirmation from several of the state governments that we've actually provided our software to. This is a letter from the Deputy Director for the Washington State Liquor Control Board, or Cannabis Board now, thanking us for our actions and our work. One from the New Mexico Medical Cannabis Program, one from Illinois, and like I said, currently we're deploying New York, and then after that we're going to move on to deploying our Hawaii system. Also, we have a patient portal, or licensee portal, or physician portal. This is basically the application portal for the state. So if the government wants to have a unified system where they can have licensees apply, we provide them with that type of software as well. In the portal, you basically go in and sign up, and you decide whether or not you're a patient, a physician, or potential licensee to cultivate, manufacture, or have a dispensary. You can fill out your application. It'll send you an email to confirm, just like any other website you would normally deal with. And then in it, you have two options. You can either print out a PDF and download it from the system and fill out the application by hand and send it in by snail mail, or you can actually fill it out online and it tracks your progress. You can log out and log back in to finish the rest of your application later on if you'd like. And that allows you to also print out patient cards. And Morgan actually has a couple copies of some demo cards that we use for the state system. So patient cards, they actually have built-in chip technology, just like you would with a debit card or a bank ATM card. These allow for less of the counterfeit. It's an anti-counterfeit measure. This is a copy of one of the applications themselves from the system. So when you print one out, this is what you would see, basically just a PDF. Also with the state traceability system, it does print out PDF copies of your manifest at the same time that it's generated in the system. So the state traceability system will have a copy digitally inside the system at the same time it's created. Both the vendor that creates the transport manifest and the receiver for the transport will actually get a copy of the manifest as well. So 3 digital copies are made, and you can print them out right there. You can also query back to those transport manifests. The reporting capabilities and functions of the software are also very robust. Financial reporting, you can tell how many plants have been sold over a specific amount of time, how many clones you sold within the week. You can look at sales trends. You can look at your harvesting trends. You can actually take data on your watering and light cycles and what nutrients you're using. You can actually notate that in the system with those assigned barcodes. So any action that you take is a digital representation of reality. Again, these are the demo cards. They can come in different colors. Basically anything that the state wants to do can be tailored. One last thing I wanted to go over is, a lot of people ask, why is it so hard for governments to legalize? Why do they have such a reservation about legalization? And the fact of the matter is that federally, it is still a Schedule I drug. We have to push for a federal legalization to allow states to have one unified platform, one unified set of standards, so everybody's on the same page. The same happens with the FDA and the EPA and the DEA with regard to prescription medication and with regard to agricultural industries for other products. The DSCSA, which is the Drug Supply Chain Security Act, was passed by Obama in 2013. And the funny thing about this is it was passed in 2013. It's a 10-year plan to basically implement traceability systems for pharmaceuticals. But yet we were already doing that with Washington and Colorado prior to this happening. So we're having an influence on other industries, and the DEA and the FDA already know it. They're already aware of what's going on. So I urge you guys, talk to your legislatures, write to your senators, write to your congressmen. Tell them, look, the more support we get from different states and from different individuals, the more we have a voice, the more we're going to be able to get legalization in different states. Thank you.
Well, I suppose I've already been introduced once, but my name is Morgan Leach. I'm a third-year student here at the College of Law, and I'm also the executive director of the West Virginia Hemp Farmers Cooperative, who's trying to put together some hemp research and development for this year. So my talk is on a holistic view of cannabis. I want to talk about why we're looking at both industrial and medical uses of cannabis. And as I've traveled the state talking about industrial hemp, no one can resist asking me, can you smoke it? And this shows me that our society already perceives this as the same plant. And this is interesting because they're right. And we as humans should know this. Our species has co-evolved with cannabis at our side. We've used it for food, we've used it for fiber, and we've used it for medicine for thousands of years. We've used it to clothe ourselves. We've used it to make ropes and sails that have aided us in the discovery of America, our home. We are intimately interconnected with it, and more so than you might think. You'll hear Dr. Kinsey lecture today about the endocannabinoid system housed within the human body. It is a system that's responsible for various psychological processes, such as appetite, pain sensation, mood, and memory. This is an exciting new area of research in the development of natural drugs that do not have the side effects of pharmaceuticals that are currently on the market. Overall, cannabis is the most beneficial plant to humans throughout our entire history. But we've made it illegal and at our own dismay. Our decisions have been based on fear. And if we allow ourselves to continue to base our decisions on fear, we will give that fear disproportionate attention and manufacture the very circumstances of which we look to avoid. Industrial hemp and medical marijuana have long been divided by this fear. Folks in the hemp camp don't like to talk about medical marijuana, and medical marijuana growers don't want to grow their medical marijuana anywhere near hemp. So let's take a moment to address a few of the misconceptions here. Some believe that hemp is being used as a cover to grow marijuana. However, cross-pollinating marijuana with hemp drastically reduces the potency of the crop. One may be interested to do this if they wanted to make no money and go to jail. To set the record straight, hemp is traditionally grown as a field crop that is used for seed, oil, and fiber. It's made into rope, textiles, paper, building materials, and even things like bioplastics and composites. Marijuana can be grown outdoors, but with technological advances that have allowed us to cultivate indoors with a high degree of quality for use in medical treatments. Medical marijuana is being used to treat things like anxiety, nausea, epilepsy, pain, neurodegenerative disorders, and even drug or alcohol addiction. We need to be creating new jobs in this field rather than sending our young folks to jail and wasting our taxpayers' money on incarceration costs. We need to combat our state's opioid epidemic by providing alternative medications. Our goal here today is to envision a strategic approach for utilizing both industrial and medical cannabis. Instead of struggling to work under antiquated laws, we've chosen to take a more holistic view of the way cannabis should be regulated. And using systems like the one that you've just heard from Cody with BioTrackTHC, this is the way to dispel the fears of our legislators and create a path to move forward. So let's get past the stigma of what cannabis is or isn't. And let's talk about how West Virginia can capitalize on the prosperity plant and how we can protect our future here in West Virginia. We all know that our state is facing a serious budget deficit. The decline of energy production has put us in a dire situation. Our leaders are hiking taxes and looking for quick fixes. But the writing is on the wall. We need to explore the opportunity of legalizing a new industry. Medical cannabis just so happens to be a booming industry with lots of growth potential. 23 states in the District of Columbia have legal cannabis of some form, and those who have boldly legalized have reaped the benefits. Colorado collected $76 million in state tax revenues in 2012, and it's only gone up since then. They have created almost 10,000 new jobs since ending prohibition. West Virginia is facing a $353 million budget deficit. Even just 1 year of legal cultivation would help to reduce that number. It would provide new jobs for displaced coal miners and veterans who are struggling to find work. The medical industry is currently valued at $6.7 billion. It is projected to hit $44 billion by 2020. And this is all without access to a federal banking system. I would hate to be their accountant. We haven't even begun to explain the potential of industrial hemp, and a lot of people don't know. But America is the only industrialized nation whose farmers are not legally allowed to cultivate hemp. We imported $660 million in hemp products and raw materials just last year. We have plans for hemp manufacturing plants that eat 20 tons of hemp a day. That requires upwards of 60,000 acres of hemp per year. The development of hemp polymers and graphenes will lead our state into the future of hemp manufacturing of sustainable products. To put this in perspective, Kentucky, one of the most progressive states, is only growing 4,600 acres of hemp this year. We need to take the same approach if we want to provide new jobs in farming and manufacturing, if we want to use hemp to reclaim marginalized surface coal mining lands, if we want to create new sources of sustainable tax revenues for our state. West Virginia has the infrastructure to house major cannabis industries, from abandoned warehouses to highways to railroads to barges, coupled with our proximity to a large portion of America's East Coast markets. We are well situated to rise to the occasion. We can capitalize on a variety of emerging markets in the cannabis industry. especially if we take a strategic approach in our research and development efforts. So how do we get there? As you've heard from Jesse Richardson, antiquated laws developed in the 30s are currently prohibiting us from this growth potential and the leg up that we potentially have in this field. The Farm Bill has allowed us the opportunity to grow for research and marketing purposes. The West Virginia Hemp Development Act, the very purpose was to stimulate agricultural development and hemp commercialization. There was an amendment passed by the Senate this session that does just the opposite. It has attempted to divide us, much like the divide and conquer strategy that has been used to keep cannabis under prohibition for the past 80 years. This approach stifles innovation. It wastes time and money. It hurts small business, and it creates uncertainty for future investment potential. Our leadership has not seen the potential that we see, and in fact, they have made these laws as exclusionary as the law would allow. While our neighbor states increase their farmer participation numbers each year, we have declined access for farmers who have dedicated their time, money, and resources towards this year's pilot programs, all due to the misunderstanding of this plan. So we must support each other if we're going to do this. If the industry is going to make it anywhere, it's with all of us. The state legislature, our regulatory agencies, this university, and our farmers. We need to learn from and build upon the model of states who are inclusionary, who welcome growth and innovation, who support their farmers and support the development of sustainable downstream industries. We have envisioned a program with integrity and talent. The collaboration of our Department of Agriculture, West Virginia University, and our Hemp Farmers Cooperative will lay the foundation for a diverse range of hemp industries. This approach will allow us to prosper from the development of cannabis industries in a calculated and strategic way. And as is our motto here at West Virginia University, we should all go first in this industry, together. We've learned from the pioneer states. We've seen their successes, and we've seen their setbacks, and we can improve upon that. We've seen them show great potential, and this is our chance to show them our potential. We need to help push our nation forward with cannabis cultivation, both industrial and medical. We need to be the 24th state to legalize, not the 44th. And it starts here with people like you who are here in this room. So I'm asking that everyone be a part of this vision. Please drop your business cards at the table in the back so that we can keep you informed on the development of cannabis laws. And when the amendment for the Industrial Hemp Development Act comes up, I ask that you submit your public comment to our State Department of Agriculture. We need to show them what industrial hemp is capable of doing for our state. Thanks, everyone.
So now we're going to take some questions. Yes. Well, let's start with one.
On the laws,
Uh-huh.
they specified sativa L, which is low, right? But nobody said anything about indigo. Is it against federal law?
Question is about indigo.
I don't know of any prohibition against indigo, not to my knowledge.
I think he means it.
Indicus. Yeah.
Indicus.
There was some precedent set early on about that. Yes, and it's been thrown out. Yeah, it's kind of a hard thing to crack. You'll find a lot of vagueness in laws, and they always win right now. There's no getting around that part. It's all law.
Okay, hold your questions. Let's let some other folks. Some more questions in the audience? Okay, over in the corner. I just want to remind everybody, if you are using social media, to use the hashtag medical marijuana, hashtag vote hemp, and I like this one, hashtag ThinkHempWV. Question?
I'm curious if BioTrack is a publicly traded company.
Currently, we're not. We are still a startup. We are quickly growing, but at this time, it's in discussion, but it's not something that's public yet.
Okay. Yes.
I'm curious why Israel was choosing West Virginia. What reasons?
When I talked to them about that, they've looked at the laws in California and Colorado, and there are some, for example, in Colorado, you can only grow a certain limited amount. And so that combined with the fact that the growing conditions in West Virginia are so ideal, and frankly, I think that they know that West Virginia needs some economic development and would be open to, they thought that we would be open to that.
Other question? Yes.
You talked about the comment period that's coming up for the current regulation for hemp. Is there a link on a website or somewhere that people in the room can go to and easily submit those comments?
There's not yet, but we'll certainly have that information available as soon as it is.
What's your website?
Right now, we're on the Law School's website for this conference, where you can find this webinar to view after the fact. And other than that, social media is always a good bet. You can follow us at the West Virginia Hemp Farmers Cooperative.
More questions over here? I thought I saw some hands. Okay.
Yeah, my question has to do with spreading the word about this idea. Particularly, we've heard, everyone's mentioned the need for economic development, and that's based particularly on the issues with the energy industry in West Virginia faltering so badly. I find it interesting that on the state flag, the state emblem actually has a miner and a farmer, and here we have the opportunity, or at least we're talking about it, for miners to become farmers and kind of transition back to that. Do any of you know of people who are actively working to kind of bridge that gap, to talk to former miners about the potential of these programs and of this industry?
Yeah, our Hemp Farmers Cooperative, we're a veteran-owned public benefit cooperative, and one of the benefits that we provide outside of our own general membership is that of education and training to those who would like to enter this industry. So whether it be veterans or whether it be displaced coal miners, we want to develop programs to train them into this industry.
Of note, the state seal is in Latin, and our legislature has passed an English-only law, so I'm not sure if that means we're in violation of our own law. It won't be the first time. Have any more questions before we move into the next panel? Yes, Mike Mannypenny.
Before we get the next question, I'd like to take the opportunity to thank our sponsors, BioTrackTHC, West Virginia Hemp Farmers Cooperative, and iHemp. Among other things, we're going to have a reception after this, and if it were not for our sponsors, we couldn't do that. So thank you, sponsors.
This is more of a comment than a question. What I'd like to ask everybody is we're going to put a piece of paper or two back in the back and ask everybody to sign up and give your contact information so we can keep you all connected with what's going on with the Hemp Cooperative Association, as well as some of the medical marijuana legislation that we've been trying to advocate and get passed in the state. So if you wouldn't mind, before you leave today, please sign up at the back, put your contact information down, so we can keep you connected with what's going on and what we plan on trying to promote in the future. Thank you all very much.
I'd also like to point out that if you go to BioTrack's website, BioTrackTHC.com, you follow us on social media, LinkedIn, Twitter, Facebook. We have a newsletter that gives out specific information with regard to the cannabis industry. It can keep you up to date on any current events or any future events that are going to happen in the industry. So.
Right. And before we move into our next panel, which is the medical cannabis portion of today, I want to introduce our very own Delegate Flanagan. We've heard so much about him, and please give a round of applause.
Thank you. I wasn't really prepared to speak. I wanted to just come in and see what all was going on. Thank Morgan for getting this set up and moving along with I think something that's very important for our state. Maybe some words of advice. I know we've heard several times, contact your legislator, contact your senators. There's really certain ways I think we should go about doing that. Recently, we kind of went through somewhat of a cyber attack, I'd almost call it, from people that wanted they were really passionate about a certain issue, and we just had maybe 2-3 days of flooded emails where we couldn't really accomplish anything towards the end of the session due to these emails coming through. So maybe when you contact them, try to not really shout, don't really demand, because this is still a very touchy subject for a lot of the people that are in both the delegation and the Senate down there. It's something I think that hopefully our steps are, while small, I think we're starting to gain ground. I know that I had a lot of people tell me their minds were changed just from a simple 10-minute speech I gave on the floor. I don't even know if it was 10 minutes. It was, how long was it? 8. Okay, about 8. Unfortunately, it wasn't a unanimous tabling. Yeah, that's okay. No, it was still nice to see that it was received at all. But I think this is a great start. I'm really happy to see so many people here. I'm hoping some of you are the ones who emailed me and to thank me and share your stories with me. I really received a lot of great emails and received so many people telling me about the things that they've gone through in their lives and the problems they've had and how marijuana has helped them with the things that they're dealing with. I think most of them were already mentioned by Morgan. The applications branch so much further than just what it helped me with chemo. And a lot of people said that they do have that stigma and they feel like they're living in a hidden fear or of persecution for using something, maybe the only thing that's been able to help them during probably a very traumatic time in their lives. I know it was for me. I'm not really sure. I would have been 4 months, that was already bad enough. And the ability to use what I was using helped me so much. I mean, it really did. We have to find a way to get this medically available to everyone in our state. It'd be nice to get it medically available to everyone in our country. We shouldn't have to go state by state. Unfortunately, we can only start where we're at. But thanks everybody for showing up, and thank you for giving me a few minutes.
Absolutely. And I think this is where it all starts.